Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously, the podcast where we pull back the curtain on money stories from your favorite activists and allies, artists and tech gurus, and trailblazing leaders in the LGBTQ+ community. We are David
and John Ottenschneider,
your financial coaches and hosts.
Having experienced firsthand what it's like coming back from debt, we want to help you avoid our mistakes to build the life that you want.
So we all can live just a little bit more fabulously.
And now for the show.
Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously. In today's episode, we're talking with Jane Sasseen. Jane Sasseen is an award-winning financial journalist with more than 30 years of experience.
Jane is also the co-chair of NewFest, New York's largest presenter of LGBTQ+ film and media. And we're excited to talk with Jane today because she talks about the consequences of emotional investing. I think something a lot of us are dealing with these days.
Right? I think the volatility in the market really encourages many of us to get excited or maybe scared, right? And we feel like we have to do something. I need to trade right now. I need to buy or sell. Reminds me of an experience that I had back in 2008 when the market was crashing. I was on the phones talking with a client and she was talking about her emotions with what was going on. And she said something to me that was really a gut punch. She said, "I think I'm gonna have to die 10 years younger than I was planning." Wow, what an emotional experience to be having because the market is moving so much.
Yeah, I think this speaks to the need of reminding ourselves, even during these peaks and valleys, that it's about time in the market, not timing the market. And it's why we need to have an entrance strategy and an exit strategy with every investment we make before we make that purchase, so that we can make pragmatic decisions and not emotional decisions.
Right, so let's dive into the first portion of our interview with Jane to see what she has to say.
Money is hard for everyone. I don't think it's specifically a queer issue, but I think also, because of the history of our relationships, we're not recognized, solidified. People have to come up with their own, ways. And I think even now, even with, gay marriage and everything else, there's a lot of things we have a history of having had to come up with our own arrangements. And that's hard. And particularly, I think there are a lot of relationships where, if there's an inequality in money and inequality in how much one person versus the other earns, that's awkward and hard in straight relationships. But there are sort of models for it and certain, I think stereotypes of, it's okay if, the man makes more money and the woman less. Obviously, when that's flipped, even in a straight relationship, it causes issues. And I think in gay relationships, all those issues, people have to deal with them on their own, and has not typically or historically been strong models or, and people talking openly about it so that you can kind of go, oh, okay, my life looks like that. I have those same problems. How do I deal with it? Okay, that helps.
Absolutely. And that's what we're trying to do now. So I'd love to dive into, you have a very interesting story about how you actually got into finance. You have a background in trying to dabble in the market and then got a little bit, had some issues during one of the downturns.
No, well, it was actually, it was early in my journalism career. I was, this was, what was it? Black Monday in '87, because I'm old. So many of you listening to this probably have never heard of this, but it was I think it was actually the biggest one-day loss in the market, even beyond the Great Depression. So it was '87, and I was freelancing. I was living in Europe and freelancing, and I inherited some money, and I had a small amount of money that I had put in the market. So I get all these calls from people because I was started in business journalism, and people were like, you got to do stories on, how the markets in Europe, how the European markets are reacting. Meanwhile, I had just put this tiny amount of money that I had inherited, which was allowing me to live there and freelance with no money, into the market, and I spent all day watching it collapse. And I was like everybody else, I was frozen. I had no idea what to do. So at the end of the day, I kind of went home and I can't stand this. What if I lose everything? And I did. I think it's kind of a stupid thing that lots of people do. It's I'll leave half in and take half out. And then sort of I'm covered either way. So pulled half of whatever it was out, went about doing whatever, work and writing stories and everything. And as happens all the time, eventually the market recovered. And it actually didn't take that long, if I recall, to recover. Meanwhile, I was frozen. And I think that's what people do. You get frozen because you don't know, because you can't predict.
Right.
And so the half of the money that I'd taken out, because I had to make an active decision to put it back in, it sat there for, I don't remember how long now, but, finally at some point I realized, oh, this other half is doing well. Maybe it's time to put the money back. And I would have been much better off just to leave it and forget about it. And I think people forget all the time that, markets do. They go up, they go down. And, and anybody who thinks they can time it, as an individual, maybe professionals can. I don't really think they can either. But certainly as an individual, you can't time it. So you just have to kind of decide, I don't need this money for whatever your horizon, if, especially at that point I was, I think, 28. It's like, put the money in and forget about it. I don't need this money. This is my retirement money. I don't need it for the next 40 years. I shouldn't think about it. And, and don't look at it, weekly or monthly or daily. I think that's the biggest mistake people make.
Obviously, I think that this was probably a very emotional time for you, right? Do you think that it would be helpful to try to figure out how to take some of the emotion out of that? Or was your way of taking the emotion out of it saying, I'm going to take 50% out and leave 50% in?
It was. And then I got kind of frozen. And again, I think this because I've talked to lots of people, friends and family, and also in reporting and journalism about that. And you get kind of frozen because it's that sort of, I think it's the indecision of anxiety.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And, again, I think if you can kind of step back and realize, this is something, particularly if it's in the stock market, you shouldn't have money in the stock market, particularly, risky investments, unless you've got a longer time horizon. It's not something where you want to put the money you might need in a year or even 2 years. But, if it's 5 years or you're saving for a house or, 20, 30 years for your retirement, you just got to kind of step back and kind of go, it doesn't matter. It's going to be there and it's going to grow over the long term, and
right.
and it's going to go up and down. And I think you just have to find a way to convince yourself of that. And if you really can't, there are some people who have too much anxiety around it because it's like, this is all the money I have. Then you probably shouldn't be in the stock market, and you should find a safer way of investing.
Absolutely. John points out this to me on a regular basis. He says that there is nothing in our society that's really created for success quite like the stock market. It's interesting you say eventually it comes back, and we've seen that happen over and over and over and over again.
That's why I love your story. I think it's a very real world experience for a lot of folks. And we did a study with the Motley Fool in 2022 and 2023, and one of the leading reasons why LGBTQ plus people don't invest in the stock market is because they're afraid of it. They don't know what to invest in. They don't know what's going to happen with their money. And I love that you're articulating the need to just take the emotion out of it, which leads into the idea of we need to have these conversations about finances so that with that information from our conversations, we can start to come up with a strategy, implement that strategy when we're not feeling stressed out, and then try to stick with it to the best of our abilities.
So that was the first portion of our interview with Jane.
Jane's great, huh?
She absolutely is. And one of the things that I really loved that she shared with us was this whole idea of where's your money and when do you need it? And maybe if you need your money right now, maybe it shouldn't be invested.
No, if you need that money right now, it should be in either a high yield savings account, a money market, a CD, or even a CD ladder.
Welcome back. Before we dive into the second half of our interview with Jane Sasseen, John and I wanted to share a little personal experience with you.
Yeah, I think our biggest frustration for why LGBTQ plus folks don't engage with their personal finances is that so many of us have been discriminated by the financial services industry, and we don't see ourselves represented in the marketing material of the industry.
Exactly, and that was our experience. You see, John and I were the co-chairs of the LGBTQ affinity group at the second largest brokerage firm in the United States. And we had financial advisors that were contacting us regularly saying, can we please have some marketing material that shows people that look like us? You see, most of the material is kind of whitewashed. It typically has a straight white couple walking down the beach with their golden retriever, and that's simply not who we are, right? So John and I over and over again went to the marketing department and said, please, can we have some material that shows our community? And for 2 years in a row, the answer was no. And what was interesting is during that time, that company was investing heavily in brand new marketing material for women investors and for the Chinese-speaking community. And that is great. That is an important thing to do. But many of us felt like we were being left out.
Yeah, and it's such a missed opportunity because according to Pride Co-op, the LGBTQ plus community has $1.4 trillion in purchasing power. That is a lot of opportunity for assets under management for financial advisors and a lot of opportunity for building financial security within the LGBTQ plus community. As a financial journalist, I'm curious to hear more about what Jane has to say, so let's dive into the second part of our interview with Jane Sasseen.
At some point in the last 15 or 20 years, they recognized women have, first of all, women have money of their own.
Right.
I mean, traditionally they served, it was, it's always shocking to me. It wasn't that long ago. It was the 1970s up until then. Women could not take out a mortgage or get a credit card in their own name.
Right.
I mean, that's not that long ago.
Right.
So, they finally recognized women have money of their own or, want to make decisions independently of, whether they live by themselves or, whoever, if they're married or whatever, and recognize it's a big market. And they've kind of figured out, there's different segments of that market, like in any population. And I think that a lot of them haven't, you see some efforts to, and there's certainly some smaller firms that, target to the gay market and, try and look at, the needs of, two women might be different than two men, obviously income levels, whether people have, couples have kids, whether they're single, all the healthcare issues, all the various issues that, can be very different for people in our community. And I think that, I think partly because the firms traditionally have been run by, a bunch of older, straight, predominantly male, they don't understand how to, kind of how to think about what the needs of the different segments and the different, groups are. So, I think probably some of that is a matter of, hiring people who are part of these communities and know what the needs of our communities are, and the different, again, parts of our communities. And I think there has been more of that kind of hiring, and certainly, my sense of, people working in the finance industry, again, if you go back 20 or 30 years, a lot of people felt like they had to stay in the closet because it would hurt their prospects if they came out. I think there's a lot less of that now.
Yeah.
And you certainly see, at the, the New York Gay Pride Parade, lots of, banks and finance firms, they have, huge big floats with, huge bunches of their employees. How much that translates into actually doing good work for the community, that I don't know.
Yeah. I think I've always said it's a mutually beneficial opportunity for financial services firms as well as the LGBTQ plus community. According to Pride Co-op, the LGBTQ plus community has $1.4 trillion in purchasing power. Annually. That is a huge amount of assets under management. And we spend most of that on travel, entertainment, personal hygiene.
Most of our disposable income goes to those kinds of things.
If financial services and the LGBT community would sort of get together and say, we can help you increase your assets under management, and the financial services industry could say, hey, we're going to help you achieve financial security, for financial wealth, even better, that's mutually beneficial for everybody. And it benefits the stock market.
Right. And I kind of wonder, is that there's something missing. One of the things John and I have noticed, and maybe you can speak to this as a journalist, is that we've noticed in publications like Glamour and Cosmopolitan or Men's Health and GQ that on a semi-regular basis, there's a personal finance article. Mm-hmm. And yet when we look at much of the queer media, it's rare, if ever, they have something like that.
We're starting to see a little bit more lately, but it's relatively new and it's still an anomaly.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think they ought to, start some columns.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think you're right, because you do see, there's obviously a ton of personal finance coverage out there in different forms and formats and, shows and columns and whatnot. But yeah, I don't think it, you're right. I don't think it has been at all a priority of the gay press, the queer press. And, again, as we said, we have very different issues. And even, you're talking about, the amount of disposable income. And I haven't seen statistics in a while, but it very much used to be the case, and I suspect it is still true. Gay men, male couples have far more disposable income than, gay women, trans people, female couples, just because of the nature of, men make on average far more than women.
Right.
I think there's probably also far more the numbers of, queer women in whether they're single or in couples that have kids, whether they had them on their own or had them in a previous marriage, So the economic needs and the kind of advice that, people have, is very different. And, again, you could run a column a month for years,
Right.
Dealing with the different issues that, different people in different parts of the community have. And so, yeah, they should start one. They should hire you. They should hire me. I don't know.
Are you looking for a job?
Not that I know of.
We hear this phrase, representation matters.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the representation that really matters is when we hear a story or we see a story that reflects who we are.
Yeah.
I just remember growing up as a kid, when my parents would go on vacation and I would sneak off to Blockbuster or whatever the video store was, and I would rent queer-themed movies because that was my only outlet to see something like that. So how have stories been a part of your life, especially as a journalist, and where you're moving to towards today with NewFest?
NewFest, yeah, and that's great that you bring that up, because that is exactly what why I'm involved in NewFest, and what we believe is representation matters. We need to see ourselves. We deserve to see ourselves, and the outside community needs to see us. We are part of the world. Every facet of our community. Again, gay women, gay men, trans people, people of color. Young, old. Years ago, when I first got involved with NewFest, a lot of the films that were coming out were really stories of people at different stages and places in their lives coming out, because that was, and it is obviously for many people, it's a huge issue. We also have so many stories now that are just stories. They're beautiful films, short films, international, and also sort of these big mainstream movies that just have queer people living their everyday lives, dealing with situations, last year we had, the Diana Nyad film, I forget the name of it.
Oh, yeah.
Jodie Foster, about,
Nyad.
Nyad, yeah. That's what it was called. Yeah, I knew it was on the tip of my tongue.
It's a simple title.
And, look, I'm a journalist. I deal in nonfiction. I admire, have friends who write fiction. I can't. I need reality. I don't have no idea how they make up stories.
Yeah.
But stories are incredibly important. Storytelling, telling stories well, is basically what my life has been about. And so that's what, that's how I got involved in NewFest. And, we do, it's mostly fictional films, but we do documentaries as well. But I just think it's incredibly important to, to be seen for these stories, and just the mass diversity of these stories to be told that, I mean, at the end of the day, we have all the same problems, all the same joys, all the same, we're screwed up in all the same ways,
right.
As straight people. And, we want to see our stories and the way we resolve those issues and go through our lives played out.
I appreciate you bring up this point of sometimes it's the everyday stories.
Yeah.
Although, an everyday story sometimes isn't the most exciting, but sometimes those are the ones that we learn from, right?
Yeah.
We getting to see ourselves. And John and I have talked about this before, about how oftentimes the stories that we hear are either the tragic ones or the excessive ones, where we are living amazingly fabulous lives. And I just think about Halston. We just recently watched that on Netflix. We talk about these kinds of stories, but sometimes we can't necessarily relate to those. I'm not going through that kind of tragedy in my life, and I'm not at that kind of level in my life. Sometimes we want to hear the stories of people who are
just regular people.
Do you think there will be any this year that have a money focus or a money story behind them?
There are 1,000 movies. There might be a chance.
There's gotta be. I will immediately find out. And does that mean I can commit you right now to sponsorship? I got to do my job as a board co-chair, man.
We'll definitely talk offline about that.
We will. I don't know yet, but there easily could be. And we definitely would be. We'd love to talk to you. There's definitely been some films where that kind of financial tension has played a role, and it's, a queer relationship. And again, whether it's, one person makes a lot more money, or, there's an inheritance or something, and those are really real issues. And I think seeing them, in film or in fiction, it helps people kind of understand, I'm not the only one that has this problem. How do these people deal with it? And then, you can end up in really interesting, dialogue and conversation about it.
And if nothing else, you have an excuse to bring it up with your partner. Hey, remember in that movie when that couple couldn't balance their checkbook?
Right.
Maybe we should figure out how to balance our checkbook.
What's a checkbook?
And who balances anymore? I don't know. I should have come up with a more contemporary problem.
Right, exactly.
What's your number one piece of financial advice that you would have loved to give your younger self?
It's basically start early, even if it's just a little bit of money, just put it aside, recognize you don't need it for a long time. Put it somewhere, that you trust with some, fund or advisor or whatever, and forget about it because you don't need it for a long time.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Just put it as, take whatever. If it's $10 a month, $100 a month, whatever, or you get an inheritance, put a chunk of it inside and forget about it.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. What is one thing that you, thinking about a year from now, you would be able to say, I love this, I'm very proud, I'm happy that this happened? For you. I mean, I think all of us are thinking about 2024.
Yeah, like that. Well, I hope I'm still living in this country, or want to still live in this country, I guess would be one way of putting it. I don't know whether that's a personal work. I'm working on a whole bunch of really great stories, with people that I work with in my job, and I just I want them to come out. I want them to be like incredibly good, and I think they're really important stories that some of them have the potential to really like help people, save lives, do good work in the world.
Whether you're at the top of the world or you're barely getting by, we all can use financial advice that we may not have heard of. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have seen plenty of multimillionaires lose it all because of the way that they have lived their lives, right?
Yeah.
And so we all can tap into a little bit of a better financial advice.
Yeah, and I also think people also have to keep in mind, it is obviously important, and hopefully people take from this and other advice to manage their money well, so that they can live happily and, don't have to, stress or struggle. But also, it's just money. It's not your life. It's just money. It helps you get the things you want and you like. And when you have less of it, you buy lower quality or slightly less of those things. But there are plenty of other things, you do without money. I am just as happy going for a hike in the woods as, spending money on, a lift ticket to go skiing. If I couldn't, in a particular moment afford the lift ticket, I'll go for a hike in the woods.
Yeah.
If I got the money for a lift ticket, great. Yeah. You can do that. But it's just money, and you can't let it run your life. That's not where the core of your life is.
I really love both of those interviews with Jane, especially the second half where she talked about how representation matters, because it definitely does. But there's this challenge that our community faces in that we don't see ourselves represented in the advertising and marketing material of the financial services industry. But on the flip side, there's a lack of personal finance content in LGBTQ plus media.
The place where we go to feel like we're being represented.
Exactly.
Right? And whether you're brand new to investing or you just don't have the time, it's 100% okay to look for somebody to get that help. And when we look for somebody where we want that help, we want to find somebody who's willing to meet us where we're at, whether that's with our experience or meet us with who we are.
Exactly. So some resources that you can check out if you need some assistance is the National Association of Pride Planners. You can also check out the CFP boards at letsmakeaplan.org or the NGLCC, otherwise known as the LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce. So thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay fabulous.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.